right away that I was in deep trouble. Uh, and obviously I was devastated. And at that point, you're just trying to survive because it's a very rare occurrence that you go from just being a normal person one day, the next day, it feels like you're one of the most hated people. And, I had social anxiety where I didn't feel comfortable going into public. But, over the course of time, I feel like I fall back on a lot of the people in my life that support me. And I'm in a loving relationship with my girlfriend now, and she's there for me during it. And we actually, I think, grew together as a couple with some of this stuff, but it hasn't been easy on her either. Because he's not, she's watching her boyfriend on some dating show and also Googling articles. And people are calling me a serial killer or a villain and saying these ridiculous things. The majority of it's not true, which is even harder to take to
Um,
the person. If I said something and did something, I can, it's a little bit easier to stomach to like, yeah, well, I was just an idiot, said something dumb or
mhm.
whatever the case may be. But if you're being hated for something that you didn't actually do, that's a whole, different amount of things that you need to get over mentally to come back from.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more, all to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Today's guest is Matthew Dubila. Matthew is a finance professional, leadership and performance coach, public speaker, and advocate for young adults regarding the importance of their mental health. He was also cast, as you may know, on Love is Blind Season 6. So welcome, Matthew. I'm glad you reached out, and thanks for coming on today. How are you?
Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate your time today. I'm doing well. It's Friday afternoon. Can't complain.
Who can complain, right? It's Memorial Day weekend, too, so that's exciting.
Yeah, I got my mom and actually girlfriend are getting their nails done right now. So as I'm doing this, so I got to take them to dinner after we get on here.
Oh, nice. Except you just like spilled the beans that you have a girlfriend, which I knew because I saw an article about it, but I guess that kills the question of, are you dating anyone right now? So we'll get that out of the
Yeah,
way.
I'm still dating the same girl that I have been for a few months, and she was my girlfriend as the show came out, and it was certainly nice to have that resource and that relationships to help me through the circumstances that I had to.
We're going to talk about that because I think that's important to talk about because that had to be hard for her, you, and your relationship. So let's hold that. But before we get to that, I always ask my guests, what did you want to be when you were a kid and then growing up, and how did that change to lead you into the pods?
As a kid, it was probably pretty unoriginal, but I wanted to be a professional athlete. Athletics was something a part of my life growing up. I even played football in college and was a captain there. Ended up blowing out my knee my senior year, so any hopes of
Oh
that were
no.
immediately diminished. But I wasn't fast enough to play with some of those guys out there, and but that's what I wanted to be.
That sucks. What did you do to your knee?
I just pulled my ACL and MCL meniscus. Some guy ran in the back of me, but it's weird because
Oh
that
my
happened, and I
gosh.
applied for the Army after college. So I graduated in 2009, and there wasn't a ton of jobs, and I got declined by the Army because of my knee injury, which it's kind of weird
Oh,
how something horrible went a different direction in your life. It could have went a different way. So who knows where I would be if I had that injury.
do you think it like maybe sent you in a direction that you were supposed to be in as opposed to in a direction that you weren't?
I think you have to kind of look at it that way. And even with this
Yeah.
experience, I never thought that I'd be sitting here having these type of conversations that we're going to have today and be in this type of position that I am. But it's where I'm at and just trying to find the best path forward.
Yeah, I think one of the most important learnings, and I've got probably a book to write about all the learnings from this, but I think one of the big learnings for me and um, like learning how resilient I am because for 2 years I just felt like everything was happening to me and I had like no control of my life. So I'm really excited to dive into how you've managed to make control of your life or take back control of your life, take back control of your story and how important it is in the work that you want to do moving forward, which is I think is good. But what How did you end up in the pods? I feel like you have a little bit of a story there as to how you ended up in the pods for the latest season of Love is Blind.
Well, I played when I was 36, and certainly unique. About 4 or 5 months prior to doing it, I decided that I was going to cut alcohol out of my life, which was a significant change because alcohol is very prevalent in society, especially dating. And my relationships weren't going the way that I wanted. And I just felt like, hey, for myself moving forward, I want to make a major change. And you go into that knowing that you're probably going to lose a lot of relationships with people that you have and the good times that you get to spend on Saturdays and hang out with your buddies. And you also know that you're probably taking about 70 to 80% of women out of the equation with dating because a lot of people, hey, let's just go have a drink. And a lot of people use it socially. And certainly you would want somebody that also participates in that socially to build a relationship. And once I dedicated myself that I had to relearn my weekends and I started playing piano, reading books, dog sitting for people, it was actually really beneficial to me just to get to do those type of experience versus signing in the brewery. And
Right.
then I got the opportunity to do this, and I wasn't going to do it, but once I think a lot of people
Did
get to
you did
36,
you apply or did
37,
they reach out to you?
they reached out to me, but I went through the process, and they
Yeah.
eventually, and they only give you like a week or two to determine whether you're going to do it or not. So there's a little bit of like time frame, but I think everybody gets to the point in their life where it gets a little stagnant. And I do believe in constantly challenging myself to grow as a person. And I thought it'd be a cool opportunity to get to go see behind the scenes of Hollywood, get to hopefully meet some great women and make some friends. All things that you thought going into it would be very exciting, and obviously things didn't turn out quite the way that I wanted. But
All the things you think you sign up for. Right.
yeah, so I mean, it's really not anything more than that. And I'm not a very big person on social media. But I thought it was a great challenge and an opportunity. Maybe have a little fun and do something crazy that other people don't do in their life. And I kind of always position myself, being 80 years old, if you look back on your life, what would you do? And continuing to take chances is something that I think is what I want to continue to grow as a person.
It is a growth mindset, right? That you have. And by doing something that's so out of your comfort zone, too, that's the only way you can grow. I felt similar when I went. I thought it was a joke at first and I was never going to get on. And I just thought, dating sucks. I don't know how dating was for you beforehand, but it doesn't sound like it was going great. It sucks. And this whole experience and the way they position it and sell it to you makes it seem like they're dedicated to helping you find love in a very fucked up world, right? So what was, I've heard you say before that um they sell you a little, these are my words, not yours, but they sell you a little bit on this being different, right? This isn't The Bachelor. I remember telling me this isn't The Bachelor in Paradise. Like, we actually want people to find love. We're not bringing on influencers. We're not bringing on people that want to be famous or they even said to us, like, one thing we learned from, or to me, one thing we learned from season one was that we want to go a little bit older so people are more ready for marriage. All of this stuff. What was your experience like, and how did they sell you on the experience as a whole?
Yeah, I had the same experience, and I'm sure a lot of people that are on the show would probably say the same thing. Is it wasn't my expectation to go in there and have what happened to happen. I was hopeful that it would be more genuine in nature, and I was obviously wrong. But I knew going in, you hear these stories about what's going on in Hollywood, that like you should be prepared to the best of your ability to protect yourself because you're going to be putting yourself in a situation where you're incredibly vulnerable. And I knew right away once I got there that I might have spit off more than I could chew. But once you're in there, you're making split decisions that are going to have significant ramifications on your life under intense pressure without any real resources of your family or friends to fall back on for guidance. So it definitely made it for an incredibly stressful situation.
Yeah, you're right, and it takes the structure. I don't think people know who haven't done something like this or haven't gone into some extreme like um, retreat or something, the role that structure plays in your life. And that was something for me that was a little bit of a shell shock. Was my structure is now in the hands, my whole day is in the hands of somebody else. So what were some of those? What were the indicators when you got there that you were thinking, oh, I might have bit off more than I could chew?
So the asking to use the restroom thing is very difficult for me. Um, I grew up in the country, so most people are going to the bathroom behind the house, or you're just in complete freedom typically all the time, and that's something that I'm generally used to. So especially as you get older, you're 36 years old. It's just incredibly uncomfortable to be in a situation like that, and it continues to snowball continuously throughout the process of that control and how little you have.
So what was so I remember for me there was like a code word. It was like maybe a 10-4. I don't remember what the code word was, but did they let you go when you asked, or was it still kind of at their discretion? Because I know for us sometimes we couldn't go when we were initially asking. It wasn't like a I have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to now escort you to the bathroom. It was I have to go to the bathroom. Well, we've got to make sure you can go to the bathroom.
I mean, it's basically like you're in kindergarten where
Yeah,
you just have bathroom breaks and you're asking permission and huddling up in line and things like that.
it
But I
is
mean,
crazy. Once you're like
community kindergarten is a fair example of probably what you could expect to be in from an outside perspective.
yeah. What was it like on your first day when you got there? Curious if it's different.
Stressful. I mean, cameras and being in front of that stuff, it's overwhelming, especially if you've never really experienced being, let alone being in front of one camera, but now you're in front of 7 to 10 to 12, and there's grown adults that are getting paid to videotape you, even when you're just sitting there doing nothing. So I knew the magnitude of the production immediately, and probably some of my experience in dealing with the money gave me some more insight of like the significance of the investment that the people were making in producing the show, and it just continued to be very eye opening of what I got myself into and where the potential ramifications could lead if I didn't conduct myself in the best way.
Yeah. And I've said this before, but like I remember initially being enamored by how big the set was. And then you add all the camera people and like if you stop for a second, think, oh my God, I'm mic'd for how many hours did you guys film, by the way, a day?
I mean, sometimes it's 14 plus,
Yeah.
but I mean,
Yeah, it's too.
it is pretty remarkable the size of the production and the experience and everything that goes into it. And very few people are ever going to get to see something like that. So yes, there was a lot of bad things that happened, but there's also some things that were kind of cool to be a party to. And I'm trying to do my best to take whatever positives I can out of the situation to move forward and be a better person and hopefully, you know, be an advocate for other people that maybe have had similar situations or whether it's public humiliation or mental health um, issues. And that's really the direction I'm trying to move forward with.
Yeah, and I think it's important to take away a learning, right? You've got to, if you sit in it, you're just a victim, and then when you're a victim, you don't have your power. So you've got to. That's the way to think about it. One of the things that I've heard you say on other interviews that I really wanted to dive in with you, because it took me 2 years after the fact to get to the conclusion that you got to pretty quickly, was that you said you became very concerned about the environment that you were filming in. And so, what were those things that were concerning to you? How did they impact you? How did you see them impact others? And, I guess in that story, or that, not that story really, but in that answer, um, what were some of the things that you maybe think could have been better?
I think initially, right away, when some of the people that were working there were insinuating that if I didn't do things that they were asking me to do, that I would be painted as a villain, regardless of what transpired. And you know that millions of people are going to see this, if not tens of millions. And who wants that? Nobody wants to be the villain. No one wants to Google their own name and see serial killer and villain. Um, it's not the type of attention that I'm certainly looking for. And that's when that stuff was happening. I even that's myself back even further of opening myself up to other people because I knew right then and there, okay, I got to be extremely careful in my thought was like, I'm just going to put all my communication energy and everything I have into growing the relationships with women. That's what I came here for. I still come out of this situation with some learning experience and potentially some connections. And I was just hyper focused on that.
What were some of those things? So threatening producers threatening people with a bad edit if they don't do what they want them to do to get their stupid story that they're trying to put together. What were some of the things that you said, no, I'm not going to do that, or that you didn't want to do, or you didn't think were fair, that they were threatening you with a bad edit? Like, it's deplorable.
I mean, like, I think a good example is when you're doing the production interviews, a question would be, tell me about your least favorite woman and why. My
Mm.
response to those type of questions were no, I'm not talking about that. So anytime a conversation was suggested through a question, talk about, any of the females or any of the guys associated, I always, refuse to answer any of those questions. And if you're not doing answering those questions, you're probably not getting them the material that they potentially may be looking for. And they kind of make you feel like oh, you're not participating in this. You're not doing the right things. We're not going to be able to show you the right way. So like it's like a constant manipulation. And I think what they're
Cult.
also trying, yeah, they're also trying to figure out who is willing to do the things that they need to do for the experience, but also I think further on beyond the experience because everybody that was there knows what happened, knows the truth, but you need to protect the lie, so to speak, with a bunch of the people that are profiting and generating revenue and their own identities from the experience.
That is very true. And that's something else I think is worth diving into in just a second. But um, did they explicitly say we're going to give you a bad edit if you don't say X or answer this question? Or was it more of like an implied? Because I always felt like there were things that were implied and it was kind of like they weren't saying the quiet part out loud, but you knew it. Or did they actually just
And
come out and say, if you don't answer these questions, bad edit for you?
it was never explicitly said like that, but like very, very careful of what they say to you because they know here's the line and we're going to go up to it consistently to see if we can potentially get you to cross it. So it's like a death by 1,000 toothpicks. And over the course of time, it's very difficult mentally and emotionally to deal with that, all day for 7 days.
Well, and then as you alluded to earlier, you're self-censoring yourself in a way too. And I don't think this is something, people say you signed up for it. Don't have any time for those people they're not serious people. But one thing I found super crazy, and I found it kind of like, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, why I'm sharing this, but I found the stress of being mic'd all the time very hard to like wrap my head around because there was like a time I went to the bathroom and I got to the point where I was like unplugging my mic when I went to the bathroom. But there was a point, and by the way, we were filming in 2021, so we were still pretty COVID protocol heavy. But like, I just swallowed spit and it went down the wrong pipe and I started coughing. And because I had my mic on, someone like came over and was like, "Are you sick? Do you need to?" And I'm like, "Whoa, like you're listening to me while I like go to the bathroom?" And so at that point, I started unclipping it when I'd go to the bathroom. But like the fact that they could take sound of me like going to the bathroom, or what if I'm talking to myself? Who knows? Like anything like this, and just do whatever they want with it. Like I found the mic thing to be very anxiety inducing to know that you're just mic'd for like 15 to 20 hours a day. Did that impact you? Did you think about that, or were you more of like the cameras?
It was a combination of both, but I don't know if any human should really be recorded for 16 hours a day because eventually you're going to say something stupid. I mean, it's almost nearly impossible to just do that all day, every day for 7 days, especially when you're doing something like talking to women through a wall and you have no ability to, understand, you know, their mannerisms, how they're, taking the approach of what you're saying. So you really have to be extremely careful. And I was more careful than probably anybody else because I knew the potential ramifications and I still got burnt. But I mean, all of this together was just probably one of the more stressful environments that I've ever been in, probably will ever be in. But once again, I'm doing whatever I can to leverage what the experience, move forward as a person, and hopefully grow from it.
When so reading the contract, which I've talked extensively about the contract. I know you've talked a little bit about it. There's sections in mine, and I'm sure they're in yours, where they talk about how they can defame you. You can be subject to public ridicule, all of this stuff that basically you look at that and you're like, or at least I looked at it, I'm like, well, I have values. Like I'm not going to say or do anything out of character, my ignorant self. And I didn't, but there were, I there were things I wish I had said differently or articulated better and blah 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 blah. But um like you said, no human should have a camera in their face for that long of a day. But what happened to you, which I'm going to have you tell it in your words, what happened to you is the perfect example of what I would never think of happening to me having gone into this situation, right? So when you read the contract and you think about that, you don't think of the fact that you can go into this pod and you can say something and it can be edited in a way that it looks like you're saying or doing something to a person that you didn't say or do something to, right? Let alone the different ways they can just edit all of this excess footage together to piece together a narrative. So when you were going into it, even though you're aware of the cameras, you're aware of everything you say and everything you do being monitored, were you aware of the fact that it can just be completely put out of order? Or could you even kind of like grasp what that would be like before you experienced it?
I mean, I was aware of the potential editing, and I mean, I knew enough about reality TV to be like, hey, this is might see a little ridiculous. You have to be prepared for yourself. But I think once I got there and I just saw what was happening, I started to relax a little bit on my end because I'm like, well, hey, some of the things that are being said that I'm not saying are much more significant in terms of being essentially not perceived in the right way if you wanted to represent yourself as an individual. So once I started hearing some of that other stuff, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm not going to be a bad guy here because I'm here for the right reasons. I'm trying to be respectful to everybody in the process. I'm not saying anything bad about anybody. And if I stick to a certain plan and try to do things the right way, I fully believed that they would see that and generally show that as part of the experience because that's what they're constantly telling everybody that like, hey, you just be your true self and do things the right way, and we're going to show that. And we're not trying to make somebody look bad if they're not actually, a bad person as part of the experience.
Right. What are the right reasons?
To go on the show,
Yeah. To
I
go
mean,
on Love Is
that's a great.
Blind specifically. I mean, we could probably do
Mm,
a whole episode on this and debate
I
it
think
back and
that
forth.
it's probably an individual response for each person, but I felt like I
Yeah.
was there for the challenge, and at the very least, what a unique opportunity to dedicate your time to strictly communicating with women and focusing solely on the act of communication, which if you polled 100 women, I think at least 70 of them would say the most important part of a relationship is communication. And I do feel
And
as an
as men, we're
individual,
still learning that.
yeah, and I still feel like I did get a lot of good experiences from, spending close to 50 hours just talking to women all day. And you're hyper focused on their tone, what they're saying, the speed of what they're saying. There's so many things that in that situation that you would never do in your typical life that I think has benefited me in my current relationship and taking a lot of the experiences from there and applying it.
I agree. I remember thinking the way they sold the show, right? Like they sold the show to you and they sold the show to me as different than other reality shows. We're not looking for influencers, all the stuff we already talked about. But what I thought that did for me, at least it did this in my head, is it kind of created the right reason for me. And then I projected that on everybody else, right? That you were there to maybe see if you could find love and fall in love through a wall, see someone, build on the communication, make it a physical relationship, see if you can do that, and then see if you can get married. And so I bought into that. And it sounds like you bought into that too as the right reasons. And once I got there, I did start to notice. And by the way, like we were season 2, so there was only one data point to look at, and that was season 1, right? And so I looked at it and I was like, oh, this does seem different. I didn't really watch reality TV, but I had seen The Bachelor a little bit, and it was like kind of gross to me, whatever. Like not the situation I want to be in. But for me, I was like, oh, the right reason is I have a great job. I'm very successful in my career. I own a condo. I have a dog. I'm in my mid 30s, and kind of was having this revelation, like you had mentioned, like where I'm missing this. Like I'm missing someone to share all of this with that I've worked so hard for, and so maybe this could work. And so, to me, the right reason was I want to go on and see if I can fall in love and get married in this crazy ass experience that's psychologically based, blah 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 blah. And then as I got there, I noticed people who had been, I'm not going to name drop, and people said, oh, you got to pick someone because that's how you're going to go farther. The farther you go, the more fame you get, the more followers you get, the more opportunities you get. And I remember people saying that. I'm like, guys, I don't think that's the right reason to be here. But as these seasons have gone on, and as this show has evolved into one of the biggest reality shows of all time and the most watched reality show in the world, as of like last season's, viewer numbers for whatever they are, that changes the way people, I think, look at it. And then I'll finish my rant here in a second, but then I started thinking as time went on with these shows, I'm like, well, what is the right reason? Because they had this brand that they were casting people who were looking for marriage, ready for relationships, not there for clout, all this stuff. And then you start seeing things digress as the seasons go on. And it seems like more and more people are there for their 15 minutes of fame than they are ever for building a foundational relationship. So I believe that they have an equal responsibility, that if they're going to sell this as different, if they're going to sell this as a real experience to cast members, they have to do their due diligence to really evaluate the kind of people that they're putting on this show. And I'm not talking about fake psychological examinations where they just learn how to trigger you, or I'm not talking about, their matchmaking or whatever they're using and all of that stuff to determine this stuff. But like the kind of people you're casting and attracting, if you're going through this extensive process, which goes months and interview after interview and psych exam and psych tests and, matchmaking quizzes and all of this stuff, like how can they claim this? And how can Nick Lachey come out on the reunion then and shame people and yell at people and scold people when you guys have the responsibility to cast the right people? If you can't see someone clout chasing through all of those interviews, like, what are you doing? So what are your thoughts on that? Because now I'm like, I think you can make the argument that the right reasons can be person by person, which is what you said. I think someone, because of how they choose to cast and conduct these shows, I think someone has the right to go on for the reason of, I'm going to go as far as I can to get as much fame as I can, because that's how they're delivering the product. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or the right reasons.
Yeah, certainly I think everybody had a different process of how they were going about it. I think some of the guys, which I think I can talk to maybe more closely to the women because you spent more time with them. I think a lot of the guys actually had good intentions. And I think from a male perspective, as part of this show, it seems like we can be an easy target as part of this. But generally speaking, I think a lot of the guys had good intentions. Were there some there's a situation like after the first date, I heard one of the guys like, "Oh, I know the woman I'm going to marry." So there was a lot of people rushing to make a selection of who they were going to pick. If you would have told people, "Hey, you get one date with each girl and you got to pick some," I think a lot of people would have still, proposed to somebody. But I think a lot of the people were there prepared to propose.
Definitely
Others,
was the
as like,
environment, right?
yeah, and
Like the
you just
pressure
get
from your
in there.
environment.
You just get in there, and it's just fame is a weird drug. And for all the people there, it's probably the only time, or most of us, that we've had the spotlight on us, people following you around and things of that nature. So you can feel incredibly important when all of that happening. People are trying to, take care of you, so to speak. So I think it's really hard not to let it feed into your decisions of what you're doing. But some of the other guys, I think they started to shift back and start to realize the significance of what was happening across the board. So some were a little bit more careful and others were a little bit more eager to do it. And especially for myself, I was probably on the lowest end of potentially looking to propose. I just, as time wore on, with the environment that I was in, I didn't really want to be a part of what was happening.
I gave myself some ground rules. I don't know if I've ever talked about this actually, but you reminded me of that. I gave myself some ground rules when I went there, and one of them was you are not doing anything for those reasons of going further. Like you're following your heart and your values. And then the other thing is that I was like, I'm not getting in a love triangle where I'm competing for someone with another guy. Like I'm just not. Like if that's something that happens to me, like I will withdraw and go home because I'm not doing that. Like that's a hard thing to do in real life. Like I don't want to do it on TV, right? Where you're competing for someone who you have feelings for with someone else as well. I don't want to do that. I like to take time to get to know someone and see what happens. But I had those kind of built into my decision making criteria there. But I got lucky because like day 3 or 4, my ex and I, we were just like it's each other, and that was a different experience because then we got to focus the next like 5 days just getting to know each other, even though we had to do other dates. We were just getting to know each other where everybody else was like trying to pick on the last day or two. And it was like crazy life altering decisions in a moment's notice. And I remember I would tell people, I'm like, you realize like this is real life. Like you're going to go to the altar, you're going to say yes or no, and you're going to like have a signed marriage certificate that's going to get filed with the government, and you're going to legally be married. Like I remember just telling people this because it felt like they weren't taking it as serious as it actually was. And I think it's to your point, you hit the nail on the head saying like people were just eager for the fame, which is crazy.
Well, I wish I would have been in a love triangle without two women and maybe it would have played out for me a little bit differently.
that's, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. But so you left, and I want to hear a little bit about why you left, how you were feeling when you left, and then what it was like for you. And actually, let's just start there. I'll ask the other one after. But what prompted you to leave? Why did you leave? And how are you feeling at this point? Because you were there, what, 7, 8 days, I think?
Yeah, and eventually when the Arcadian Amber thing happened, at that point everybody's been there for quite a bit of time and there's some pretty severe emotional reactions happening amongst everybody. And then for myself, it was just becoming draining, alone. And I wasn't going to get engaged. I made that pretty clear, I think, at that point with AD. And I think that was a part of what she wanted to accomplish with the experience. And I respected that. And I just thought the best thing that I could do for her at that point was to let her go so that she can move forward with somebody else, which is an incredibly difficult decision, especially because I knew that conversation that I was going to have with her was most likely if I was going to be on the show. I knew that conversation was the one that was probably going to be shown. And they showed some of my intensity before around the guide. And really that just stemmed from knowing that I had to go in there and have this conversation where this person I had spent 7 days talking to, and the day before she told me that she would get engaged with me. It's right. Like she said, if she had to pick, she would pick me. And that's when I really touched on like, hey, you should leave the show. Some of the things going on here are not okay. I think it's the best thing for a relationship to do this in the right way rather than through this process. She decided to do it, and I respected that. And then after the show, I was just in a mess. I think
Can we,
anybody,
yeah, I was going to say, I want to take a minute to ask you because that's the exact situation I wanted to avoid. Like, I didn't want to have my heart broken because someone didn't choose me. So you got you got chosen and then dumped essentially because you wanted to leave. Like wrecked. I'm like wrecked for you. How was like what was your decision making process? Had you already decided no matter what you were done and it was whether or not she was going to come with you?
yeah, I think it got to the point where knowing that manipulation storyline was being played, that I thought the best thing for me was to exit and separate myself from the experience completely. But it's not easy when you leave the experience and all these other people are still there. I don't know what's happening, but I'm assuming that she's going to get engaged to Clay, and then they're going to go on the vacation and they're going to do all these things, and you're at home knowing that's happened, and you just spent 7 days talking to this person, and I never even got a chance to meet her, and I never contacted her or anything. I never knew what was going on with anybody, and eventually, after probably 2 months, she reached out to me directly first, and we dated for a few weeks, but
That had to be so hard.
yeah, I mean, it was difficult, but I mean, you do the best you can in the circumstances as you move forward. And I've always appreciated my relationships with her and our friendship moving forward. We just have completely different lifestyles. I know I talked a little bit before about living an alcohol-free lifestyle. It's if somebody likes to enjoy that part of their life and do those type of things, it's just a lot more difficult to connect with somebody who's living a different way. So that was where our biggest
And I
difference is, and
think
I always saw that.
you know what I unfortunately experienced with this and my divorce because this environment is so structured and so unrealistic to how real life is. I totally understand how lifestyles you're not integrating your lives until this whole thing is over. And that's when you need the support and the help. But like that's also when you're already married. So if you find out you're incompatible in your lifestyles, you can't find that out until you're already married, giving this show all that content. Right. So I think looking on how you thought about that is something that every single person who ever goes on a dating show with consequences and ramifications of a marriage need to consider that. So I thank you for sharing that because that's one of the hardest things is you don't get to integrate your lives in any real way whatsoever. It's all manufactured.
Yeah, I was being realistic about the situation. I mean, it is pretty wild to think that you're going to propose to somebody without ever meeting in person. And there's a lot of risk there too, because you may not potentially have that physical chemistry, or you may not have any lifestyles, or go to a ball game together, or whatever the circumstances might be. Yeah, I knew that. And I think you saw some of that with playing her, just a little bit different in terms of those things. And as I'm watching them to do it, I was like constantly envisioning myself of what was that story then. And I can't imagine the type of stress knowing that you have to make a decision at the altar and the time frame is so short. That to me, I just did not believe that I wanted to put myself in that type of situation. Because if you go there and you do it, you say no, I mean, you're almost guaranteeing yourself that you're going to be ridiculed and potentially posted as the villain.
Well, I can tell you, dude, anyone's going to be the villain if they decide. I'm pretty sure Santa Claus giving presents to kids on Christmas, he would be a villain to people on reality TV one way or another because people literally will hate on anything. So I do think, and I can actually speak. So the pressure of the getting married thing, it's weird. I had such a connection to my ex Danielle that I remember thinking proposing felt like nothing. It really felt like nothing. And there was, this tiny little part of my brain that was like, what if we're not physically attracted to each other? But I was like, this is where it gets interesting. am I going to be attracted to her because I'm just engulfed and in love with her personality? Or am I going to not be attracted to her? And then all of a sudden, the things about her personality aren't going to mean as much. And I was like very in my head about that. Right. But where the pressure really picks up is when your wedding day is this random day. Like I worked on my wedding day up until the time it was time to go down the aisle. So I'm trying to like process, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? And she and I had talked, and we had been back and forth for like almost a week at that point. Like one minute I'm a yes and she's a no, the next minute she's a yes and I'm a no, and we didn't decide until like right beforehand. But we were both, I mean, she was doing her wedding stuff. I was working. I was on phone calls all day. Like I couldn't even think about it. And it was just so on top of like the pressure of, am I going to marry this person? You get the pressure of like your everyday life on there. It's not conducive to making an educated decision. It's just not. And so the pressure there, and this is another one, and you alluded to this. So I'll ask you, like, what do you think about this entire getting married thing in this scenario? Like, don't you think it could be like, maybe you just propose at the end instead of the whole marriage thing? Because there's like legal ramifications of getting married.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly set it up in a way that's going to create the most interest and the most profits still for TV. So I understand why they do it that way. But certainly, somebody that's in the experience, the pressure of the situation, making those decisions always felt on a high, just awkward. You just don't feel like something that, like a marriage, should be something that you feel pressured to move into. Like it should be two people making a decision together at an appropriate pace, at an appropriate time where you can both feel that you're 100% committed and have the appropriate time with each other to figure out if you can make it 20, 30, 40 years. Because I would just be completely embarrassed if I went through the process, got married, got engaged, became famous for doing all this, and then 2 years later I'm divorced. Like that, that's another
You're me at
difficult
that
thing.
point.
Yes, that's another difficult thing to go through. And I was envisioning that, and I just felt like that would be not something that I wanted for myself.
Man, I wish I had that frame of thought sometimes. But I don't regret my marriage, but um yeah, let me tell you, man, the divorce, the public divorce, the um opinions, and then the heartache, because like I was really in love with her. Like I to this day sometimes I'm like, I have to make peace with the fact that like we're not gonna, you know, do the plan that we made for ourselves, right? And so I think what's hard too is, to everyone else it's something they saw on TV, but to you it's like, or at least to me, it was a real marriage ending. I was losing family, new friends, the person I thought was going to, be the mother of my children, and that we were looking at houses to buy together. Like all this stuff, you can lose it, and then you lose it in the public, and it's hard enough to go through a divorce, but then to do it with the public's opinions and scrutiny and all of that stuff. And that's one of the things I think people don't understand is, when you make a mistake or you go through a divorce, you go through a breakup or something in your real life, like you get to do that in the privacy of your friends and your family and yourself, without, and of course you'll have friends and stuff that gossip, but like you have to do this in front of the whole world, especially if you've done something like really bad. Like that is just something, unless you live through it, you do not understand what that is like. And so I appreciate you kind of having the wherewithal to see that. And I think that's another thing I want to bookmark for people listening to this, that you need to think about that. You need to think about the pressure and what it's going to look like for you if you get back into real life and it doesn't work out the way you wanted to. Because I don't think a lot of people think all of this through, even when you're going through it, almost like it's even real, because it is a lot of glamour, and it is real, and it can be damaging, which is what I want to get to with you now. Is you had this breakup that was difficult, and then you reconnected a few months later after all of it. But what was going through your head, and how were you feeling about the show coming out? Because I always say that's like the third or second pressure cooker. The first one is the whole show experience. Then there's the anticipation of it coming out, and you have no idea what's in there, if you're in there, how much you're in there, how you're portrayed or anything. So what was that timeline for you? How did it make you feel?
I was actually relatively optimistic. I felt like I did the process the best that I could and was respectful and did things that I thought were the right way. And I felt I was in good graces, so to speak, to the people that were producing the content. So there was never an expectation that what happened was going to happen. So obviously I was blindsided by some of the short little snippets and what was shown and edited. Like random America comments are being played over as voiceovers, which those, I mean, it was kind of funny. Like some of the stuff was kind of funny, but like I had like
Doesn't mean it's
conversations with
not
the producer.
hurtful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's easier to talk about it now than it was when it all came out. The America comment was said in like a producer interview, and that was played multiple times in voiceovers at like the most random and awkward spots. And like they're watching it, and I know what I said and did, so I had a different perception of what's being played than probably the public or people that are watching it. But even
Mhm.
like friends or people that I had relationships for years, you come like, did you really walk out on a girl? I'm like, no, I didn't walk on a girl, but it's really hard for a person to not internalize something that they saw with their own eyes. And
Yeah.
it's a little frightening, especially with AI moving forward, of what some of these people may be capable of in terms of manipulating people or showing people a particular life that maybe not be true. And certainly when it came out, I knew right away that I was probably in deep trouble. Uh, and obviously I was devastated. And at that point, you're just trying to survive because it's a very rare occurrence that you go from just being a normal person one day, the next day, it feels like you're one of the most hated people. And, I had social anxiety where I didn't feel comfortable going into public. But, over the course of time, I feel like I fall back on a lot of the people in my life that support me. And I'm in a loving relationship with my girlfriend now, and she's there for me during it. And we actually, I think, grew together as a couple with some of this stuff, but it hasn't been easy on her either. Because she's not, I mean, she's watching her boyfriend on some dating show and also Googling articles, and people are calling me a serial killer or a villain and saying these ridiculous things. The majority of it's not true, which is even harder to take to
Um,
the person. Like if I said something and did something, I can, it's a little bit easier to stomach to like, yeah, well, I was just an idiot, said something dumb or
mhm.
whatever the case may be. But if you're being hated for something that you didn't actually do, that's a whole, different amount of thing that you need to get over mentally to come back from.
Oh my God, dude. I don't even know what to say. Being hated for something you didn't do, but people think you did it. I got goosebumps, and I don't think these are in a good way. I think it's like the flight way, right? Like this is very uneasy to hear. And very
Well, it's not
simply
fun to
put,
it's not
for
fun to talk about. I mean, it's part of
no,
the
I
reason
know, I
why
know,
it took so long. It just I want to be able to deliver the message of my story and what I'm doing moving forward in the right way. And I don't think I was prepared mentally and emotionally to do it because I may have been more revengeful or emotional in my response. And one thing that I've learned as a career professional is you don't want to ever make decisions that are really impactful on your life when you're in an emotional state. You want to try to be as calculated as the process as best you can. That's what I did leaving the show and after. Like, I want to make sure when I have my turn to talk that I'm more believable in terms of telling the truth. Because if I would have said things right away, I think people would have not received it maybe as they differently as they do now. Now I know my microphone is a lot smaller than it could have been if I would have done the reunion or done some of those things, but it's very difficult to go back into an environment of people manipulated and told lies about you, and then you're going to also go back and help them, market the brand and make more money off of a lie. So I tried to be the best I could, but you're making decisions and you just keep moving forward.
yeah, it's the old adage of you want to respond, not react to something when you're in an emotional state. And I credit you deeply for doing that because it's not easy. And I know when I went through my stuff and I was getting misrepresented in the media, people were lying about me, people had all the wrong. The hardest thing for me was not to go back because I used to be very reactive and also an asshole. I can still be an asshole, but that doesn't go away. Very sarcastic. But I think your ability to sit it out when the spotlight was the biggest and to sort of organize your thoughts and your feelings and how you want to communicate and what you want to do out of all of this, and then hold it for the right moment is admirable and something that you should be proud of and other people should look up to as a goal for themselves, because your microphone, like you said, would have been bigger and you would have gotten so many more opportunities to tell your story, to be in the headlines, to grow your, let me tell you, nobody, I've lost a ton of followers, which is fine. I don't really care, but nothing would gain me followers like people waiting for me to respond to something that was said about me. And I just never really did because it's not in my nature. But you could have grown your social media, you could have grown your reach, you could have grown your media presence by doing it in the right moment and getting wrapped up in all the drama. But now you're going to be able to tell your story and you're going to be able to tell how it impacted you and how it changed your course on the things that you care about. And that has longevity. Where people who are gossiping about a reality show in the middle of it airing, that has 15 minutes and isn't going to translate into anything other than you chasing more of that drama. And I've seen that personally happen with people from my season. I've seen that happen with people on other shows where they chase that drama and then their identity becomes that 15 minutes and they don't know what to do with it after. And so you're doing the right thing, in my perspective, to have longevity and really do the things that you want to do and have the impact that you want to make. So
It's such a unique experience to get a look behind the curtain of an environment that very few people in our society get to see beyond. And as it's going on and these things are happening, and what happened to me, I feel a weird connection to all these other people that have maybe been in a particular situation where they've been taken advantage by people that have significant amount of power over you. And I never would have thought that I would be in a position where I feel like I have to tell the truth, because if I don't tell the truth, more people might get hurt. And there's plenty of people that have been in that environment and that culture that have committed suicide or have had significant mental, health issues or drug addiction. And now my perspective is I think I have such a much better understanding of what those people went through and maybe why some of those things are happening. And he watched something like a Nickelodeon documentary. I can only watch 30 minutes of it. But that type of culture is wrong. And I think we oftentimes in society place a lot of hope or belief that people or corporations or institutions are protecting us. And really the only thing that protects us is us. And if people don't tell the truth about things that are not going on that are right, it's more likely going to happen to more people. My goal isn't to bash them, but to tell my truth. And so hopefully some people will watch it. And if there's other people that are going through similar experiences, hopefully they can relate to what I went through. And that's just going to be my message of what I'm trying to do moving forward.
And when you were in this, when did this come out? Was it February, right? February, March, right?
Yeah, I think it's February.
So
March.
you've been in this now for 3 months. By the way you talk about this now, it took me 2 fucking years to be able to put together any thoughts similar to this. So this is the part I've been waiting to hear. I feel for you, and watching back something that didn't happen. When I watch back my season, I always say I compare it to being gaslit, because I'm like, well, that didn't happen that way, or I didn't say that to that person in the pods, or that conversation wasn't dramatic. We were very tongue in cheek, but you add dramatic music to it, cut it a certain way, and it looks like we're arguing. So it was there were very things, but I would say what happened to you is downright lie. It's just not real. And so the feelings that you had of watching something and being hated for something you didn't do, like being hated for something you didn't do. How did you manage in these moments? And I think you were smart, like I said, to not get involved in more of the drama right when you weren't ready. But how did you manage? What was your toolkit to protect your mental health and protect your relationship, by the way, because I can't imagine what that was like for her either. What were those tools that you used, and how did you get through it and come out the other side in such good shape already?
Well, I think AD is right when she said I was disciplined, but I think a lot of my successes have been trying to get through a totally difficult situation. I would revert back to that. So things that I was doing, simple as, here's 5 folds for the day, which is read a book, play piano, take care of my dog, don't eat food past 7 o'clock. Just really break it down to try to feel like I'm accomplishing something, and rather than having to focus on something that I really have very little control over, even though you feel like the whole world hates you. And that's not true. I don't think everybody that watched it thought that I was the villain. And I've heard that from people too. But when you are online and you're seeing people say things like, oh, this is Jeffrey Dahmer #2, or you're watching a video from psychologists suggesting that you have serious mental issues or you're autistic, and you have to do the best you can to separate yourself from that, because it can be very difficult. And
Yes.
when I think about what I went through with like online bullying, and I never thought that I would be the person to advocate for this, but I can certainly connect with younger people and how difficult that can be to put yourself out there, even if it's a couple of comments, like what that can make you feel about yourself. And you got to work really hard to trust who you are as a person, especially when you have so many people saying otherwise. So I just fell back on my consistency and discipline. And every time I get through a difficult moment of life, I feel like that always can propel me through, at least on the other side. But this was incredibly difficult. So I feel at this point I've made it through, and I'm moving forward with some of the things that we discussed, and I'm looking forward to be a resource for young people if they want to discuss mental health or online bullying, or some of the things that I have a unique experience that most people don't.
And you have it in sort of a amplified kind of way, where you have strangers hating you and people probably hating you that maybe weren't strangers. So that's great. And how do you see yourself moving forward? I know you said you want to help with young people. You recently launched your coaching business. What are you like? What's your vision for yourself, and what exactly do you want to do outside of just being sort of an advocate for young people and online bullying?
Well, I think it's helpful for any situation that you're going through if you can relate to somebody that has something similar happen to yourself. And if you're, a 16-year-old or 20-year-old person that's getting bashed online, your parents probably can't connect with you too much on that, because they grew up in a generation where those things didn't exist. And things that we think are important are probably completely different than what young people think are important. And you watch the Little League World Series, and most of the people want to be TikTok stars. So their gravitation towards social media and all these things is much more significant. And there's a lot of clear statistics that I think suggest social media is a driving cause of increased suicide rates for our youth. And
Yeah.
how can I say
And just mental health struggles in general.
right? And how do I take a horrible situation and try to make a positive of it? And
Yeah.
this is the only path I can think of at this point where at least I can have some purpose. And at some point, if I can have people say, "Hey, I appreciate you telling your story. I appreciate you, working with me or putting yourself out there. I really related to what you went through because I had this going on in my life." If I can at least have that at some point, then I can feel at least what I went through, there was a purpose and I made something good out of it.
I, I love that. I think that is your growth mindset again showing, right? I've got to turn this into something that's better, something good. I share that feeling with you. and that thought process as well. How can you, if you look back on your whole experience, and by the way, one of the things you're going to find out, um, this show comes out every 6 months now, which is always going to be a constant reminder for a very long time of your experience, right? But at the same time, it's going to bring people that go back and watch all the seasons again. And so there's going to be new rounds of people, and it's not as big as it is when it comes out the first time, but this is something that you're going to sort of be brought back into every 6 months for at least a little while until this show gets stops being such a cash cow. But so you'll learn that coming up this fall when the next season comes out, right? But what's one thing that you would look back on and say from this whole thing that I'm blank because of this experience? Something like that. Something new, I guess, something that it knew other than knowing you're resilient, which is true.
I am a better communicator with my girlfriend, and I have to be grateful for that. It's incredibly important. If any guys are listening, and your girlfriend or your wife or your friends are telling you how important, you probably can't really fathom how important it is. And I just think having that experience around building these relationships, and we're just talking and communicating, and we're growing strong feelings, and I can sense that these women are growing strong feelings for me. I mean, I had a woman say that she would marry me, so that it didn't happen. But I certainly dedicate a lot more energy to making sure that my communication is meeting my girlfriend needs. So, once a week, we have a designated time, whether it's Sunday night, where we have to talk about what happened in the week. If there's anything that we need to discuss amongst each other. So there's particular processes that I've taken from the experience to apply it in my own life. And this is probably making me sound like even more of a nerd that I'm this
No, I think
analytical.
this is
But I mean,
a
I
lot of
think you could
therapists
really,
listen to this show. They would be proud.
like, I mean, I'm trying to leverage those experiences to benefit myself and hopefully become a better partner.
I love that. And good for you. I'm very happy to hear that your relationship is going well. And last thing I want to ask you, I had some other things, but we'll do this again sometime. Um, what advice would you give to someone who would call you and say, "Hey, I just got casted on Love is Blind"?
That's a tough question.
Good luck.
I I would I would encourage them to do as much research as they possibly could to make sure they're making the best decisions for themselves. And I never watched the show, but I watched the first couple episodes of season one, and that was probably a mistake. But I also didn't want to go in with any preconceived notions of what the experience was. I was like, well, I'll just attack this with a fresh mind and a positive outlook and try to do the things the right way. Because I did fully believe that if I did that, that the outcome wouldn't have been what it was. And for the people going in there, I hope you're looking at some of the themes past with people that have been involved and hopefully some of the conversations they're having to make sure you're aware that regardless of who you are in there, it may not be what is shown. And that's a significant risk. And if you feel that's in your best interest, that's your decision. But I would be more prepared of the potential ramifications for your mental health, your career, your personal life, all the things that are significantly impacted by doing something like this. Talk to myself or other people that have maybe been a part of it, but do your research.
Yeah, I would say come to the UCAN Foundation because we have a lot of prep tools and questionnaires and stuff that can help you figure out if this is the right move for you too. But I will say I got asked this. I can't remember which podcast it was, but it was recently. It might have even been the Ask Me Anything on one of my shows. But someone asked me, having if I had never been on the show, would I go back on it now for like season 7? And this is where like my brain broke because I was like, I don't think so, because there's too much data showing all the ramifications of it, all the potential challenges. And now I have the feeling of my experience and what it went through and the knowledge and the learnings and the understanding of that. But if I were to go back, so to your point, like I watched all of season one. You went back and watched a few episodes, and to me, it seemed different. It seemed genuine. It didn't seem like The Bachelor in Paradise, right? And so if I were to go back now and watch all of this to go on a new season, I would be like, fuck no. These people are nuts. This whole experience is crazy and not real. And it would just be totally different. So I like to ask, I wanted to ask you that because I feel like people still want to go on these shows. And I have people that are like loyal followers that are like, oh, I want to apply to this. So I'm like, do you not listen to anything that I say on your own podcast? Like it is funny. But you're right. Fame's a weird thing. You said that earlier. So that's really, really good advice. And I think, I hope anyone who listened to this takes that advice. I think I've gotten like 3 things from you today that I think everybody should listen to. I might just make a short little video of those as well. But yeah, that's really good advice. And I have one more last question. This should be a quick one. Would you would you ever do if you were to do another reality show, what's the one thing that you would change to make it better?
Well, if I was ever going to do one, I'd probably be naked and afraid. But I mean, I would appreciate the challenge. I would prefer to have clothes on, but I'm a hunter and enjoy being outside. So in a crazy way, I think that'd be an awesome challenge to see if I could survive for a week in the wilderness. But this reality stuff it's a unique animal, and it's very difficult to articulate to people appropriately what's going on. And it's I think
Because
even
it's
really
so
difficult,
unreal.
right? It's just really hard for people to even understand what's happening. But stuff is this stuff is if you're looking for it and the fame is that important to you, for those people, they're probably going to still take the risk. If you have things going for you, successful career, you're happy, maybe you're missing out on the opportunity of finding someone. Make sure you're doing your due diligence if you think this is your best interest, because the outcomes are more out of your control than you would be able to predict.
But you signed up for it. I'm kidding. That's
I did.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, but you signed up, or technically, yes, I did sign up to go on a reality show, but you don't know what you're signing up for. But that's again very well put. So this has been awesome. But before we head out, is there anything else you want to share, or anything you want to ask me for my Ask Me Anything part of the show?
I mean, I have so many questions about your relationship and what that was like, and the divorce. I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax that you had your own unique experience. I mean, what would you share with people from your perspective, which is completely different than mine, that you think would help?
Oh, that's a really good question. Wow, wasn't expecting that. Okay. So 2022 2022 was supposed to be the best year of my life. The show was going to come out. I was married to this beautiful, smart person, and I was obsessed with her. All of her little quirks, all of her little ways of doing things, the way she talked, like just everything. And I was thinking, wow, what a cool way to meet the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And now the show's going to come out, and we're going to be this like, success story of how crazy this thing can be. And I hadn't processed all the craziness at this point, right? Because it was hard. I mean, our marriage wasn't easy from day one. I'm not pretending that, but it didn't mean there wasn't this love there. And then I had this moment at the end of 2022 when the show had come out, our relationship fell apart, served with divorce papers, smeared in the media, defamed, getting so many people from the show that I thought at least I had a trauma bond with, never sent a word of support to me as these things were happening. And then I lost my job, partially because of what was being said in the media. And I was at rock bottom. I was like, I lost it starting the year that was going to be the best year of my life. And then it's December 22nd, 2022. All this stuff had happened, and I had to keep my cool because I wasn't going to be reactive, right? I was going to be responsive when I did finally speak on it. And you know, I had lost my career, which was so important to me. It's like the things I said earlier to you. I had all of these things and I was just missing someone to share it with. Well, almost all of these things were gone now. And I couldn't understand how so many things happened at the end of the year, or in the course of a year. And I can tell you there, the last 2 months of 2022 and even into January, those were the worst months of my life. And there were days where I was literally like, I can't do this anymore. And I don't know what that means, but I think we could all probably figure out what that meant. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any reason to get up. I didn't have any reason to do anything. I didn't have any reason to, I didn't have anyone to go through this with. It was so lonely. And the fact that like I didn't have any other cast members reaching out or asking if I was okay. I didn't hear from Netflix other than to hear, we're not going to sue you for breaking your contract and getting a divorce before you were allowed to. Like no one checked in, no one cared. And the people in my life, they tried, but they didn't understand like what it was like to be going through this and the loneliness and then the loss. Cause I'm mourning the loss of my wife, my family, all the expectations, all the plans we made, the fact that I thought I had found them, like I said, the mother of my children, and I'm just doing this, and you lose your job, and I just felt like I completely lost everything, and I didn't really, at the time, I didn't feel like I had what it took to pick myself up, which is why I'm so enamored by you doing this in 3 months, because I'm still picking myself up, and even in the the last month or so, um, and a lot of it was tied to having trouble finding a job. Like I had a killer resume, killer experience. I'd been all the way up to being a CMO at a, $50 million software company, at 50 million a year software company. And now people don't take me seriously. People think because I'm on a reality show, I don't know how to talk to customers anymore, or I don't know how to talk to analysts anymore, or that but associating your small business with my name was potentially damaging. Like these were the things that I just felt like I don't know how to get out of this. And then that with the loss and the pain and the lack of closure, and then the starting after this, the like healing process of accepting that this was something that I did, this isn't who I am, and trying to like do all of this while I'm wondering how I'm going to pay my mortgage, when I'm going through my savings, when I'm buying groceries on credit cards and I'm not having an income. And again, all while dealing with losing the person I thought I was spending the rest of my life with and all the family, and it was just this horrible place and to be in. And I spent so much time in that. And sometimes I still find myself in that. And when I started the UCAN Foundation, it was out of anger and it was out of frustration and it was out of love for what I could have had, or I felt I could have had with Danielle, and what they did to her mental health, what they did to me, and then the lack of care. Like, I honestly don't think I would have done that if someone would have just checked in on me when my whole life went to shit because of this show. And no one did. And so I was angry, I was frustrated, and I wasn't going to let this happen to anybody else. I wanted someone else to speak up and do it. Nobody else wanted to do it. And so I said, fine, I'll do it. Reluctant leader. But the pain and the agony, it's all still there. And every 6 months, it comes up for me, right? I have to go back and mute People and or People Magazine online. What's the other one? Us Weekly, Entertainment Tonight, Entertainment Weekly, all of these Instagram accounts, because it's who's still together from Love is Blind, or look at this new drama from Love is Blind. And it's just constantly like, oh my God. And that's why I'm like, how do I get out of that? And that's what I've been thinking about the last few months, and really the last month, is how do I get closure? Right. And I had started separating myself from UCAN a little bit because I just felt detached from it. And then it kind of started clicking the last few weeks. And I'm like, I'm looking for my closure. I'm looking for the end of my book, right? The end of my story. And I'm in the middle of my fucking story. And I've been saying this a lot lately because it's all coming to me, but like, I'm in the middle of my story right now. And my story is pushing UCAN to push these companies to do things better. And they are not going to get away with this. They are not going to be able to do what they did to Danielle, myself, you, all of these others, that lives have just been completely disrupted for your entertainment. That those days are numbered. And I'm going to finish my story by making sure that there are basic protections for people's rights as humans, for people's rights to own their story and their autonomy. And that will be the end of my story. And that's when I'll ride into the sunset. And so for me, it's been this whole journey of figuring out, like, how do I close the door? How do I close the door? Realizing like it's not time to close the door yet. And getting to that point where I am now comfortable closing that door and saying that this is something that I did. This isn't who I am. And I have paved the way on a road that didn't exist for people to follow, make the road better, and know that it's okay, and have the legal protections to speak about what their experiences were. So it has been the hardest. I learned I'm resilient, man. That's all I can say. Like those days in 2022 and early 2023, they were dark. They were very, very dark. And I don't really talk about them much because it's easy to get sucked back into that feeling. But it's a lot of resilience and just believing in myself. To something else you said too earlier, one thing I found in myself that kept me going in the darkest moments and the moments I didn't want to continue, the moments where I completely withdrew and people didn't see or hear from me for months, the only accountability, or weeks at least, months for a lot of people, the only accountability I had was taking my dog outside. And so I realized that I am so fucking resilient, and that I kept my integrity when it would have been so easy to go get wrapped up in all the drama and start spewing all the my truth. And it just wouldn't have done anything except escalate that pain for me and escalate that pain for Danielle. And I'm proud of myself when I look back on it, that I kept true to myself and my integrity, and I didn't do that despite all the pressure to do that. So yeah, it's a killer experience, man. It's crazy. It's hard to imagine and even talk about something still.
Hey, I hear you.
But I appreciate that question, and I got a little long-winded there, but man, this was great. I have to say, like, I know we've chatted a few times. I'm proud of you for whatever the hell that's worth. Like, it is so refreshing to see you bounce back and then turn this into something more than like just bitching, right? That you want to actually go and turn this experience into something that you're passionate about, which is helping other people learn how to be, better versions of themselves. So kudos, and the speed. I think there's a book to write there, like 60 days to not giving a shit what other people think about you or something.
We'll have to work on the title, but that's not a bad start.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the 5 o'clock on a Friday.
Yeah, that's not bad, but I do appreciate your time and your willingness to work with me and having me on your show, and your support throughout. Means a lot. I do.
Of course. And where can people find you online if they want to connect with you for coaching, or just give you a follow to keep in touch with you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Dubila_. I'm not a huge social media person. I actually didn't know that you had to put your full name in there to be searched through Instagram. So when the show came out, people couldn't even find me. I had no idea how to work with stuff, but I also set up a website, Dubila.com, and that's where, I'm going to run my business. So hopefully be an advocate for people that have been in abusive situations or young people that are having hard times dealing with online bullying or other mental health issues.
Thank you for your work. And all of those links will be in our show notes if you want to give him a follow or check out his website. Thanks again, man. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.